Hello everyone, this is Laura from Empowering Attachments, a blog that tells in a very raw and truthful way the story of our adoption journey and in particular the problems we have encountered within the education system. Let's start at the very beginning. I qualified as a primary school teacher in 2004 and after my probation year was lucky to get a full-time permanent position, which were, at that time, few and far between. My job was in a large city centre middle-class school. We had a varied catchment area with many children from affluent families and others from less privileged surrounding areas. Over my 8 years at the school, I taught a variety of pupils and want to talk about some particular children today. Their names have obviously been changed for confidentiality reasons. Let's start with Robin. I taught Robin twice in her primary years, one of which was my very first year at the school. She was the child who would be sitting at my feet all the time, touching my shoes or trying to hold my hand at any possible opportunity. She had speech delay and academically was behind her peers. She would often be removed from the classroom to go to support for learning. She struggled to get on with her peers and would often be rather inappropriate with them, using quite vulgar language. In class, she would lack concentration, but would always be trying to please you too. Robin's dad had died when she was younger, and her mum was an alcoholic. She was often the one having to get her sister and herself ready for school in the morning, as mum just couldn't cope. In the same class, and so also a child I taught twice, was a girl called Danny. Danny could be aggressively loud in class, always trying to be cheeky to make others laugh. She was physically violent and very threatening towards other children. Danny was the child that many others were afraid of, as she was seen as a bully. Danny lacked concentration, but was actually an able child. She rarely applied herself unless an adult was supporting her. Danny's parents were drug addicts. She often had to be cared for by her grandmother, but she was finding that her behaviour was getting out of control. Danny was part of a crowd outside of school who would cause damage and threaten other children. It had been decided that Danny could no longer be looked after at home, and plans were put in place to move her into foster care. At the last second, her grandmother said she would keep her. She struggled on, and Danny's behaviour just continued to escalate. Danny had beautiful handwriting, and I once commented on how beautiful her work was. She tore the page out of her book and put it in the bin. I taught a boy called Scott in a primary 7 class. He was very clingy, and because of his age, it was verging on what, at that time, I would have described as quite creepy. He would try to hold my hand, try to rub my leg, told me on a number of occasions that he loved me. This was from a big stocky boy of 11. He had severe dyslexia and so often went out of class to support for learning. He persistently told lies and stole things. He would tell all sorts of tales about his father, saying that he'd arrived to school with him in a helicopter, when actually the truth of it was he didn't even know who his father was. He had a little sister, and all of his mum's love and attention was given to her. Mum didn't like Scott and went so far as to saying to her head teacher that she wished someone would come and take him away. Scott was sitting in the room at the time. He struggled to get on well with his peers because he was too intense with them all the time and would just continually tell tales on them. Jack was in my class after joining our school the year before. His dad had walked out on him and his mum when he was a baby. He had been living with mum, but she'd found out that she had cancer and sadly passed away. Jack was sent to live with his dad after not seeing him for at least 8 years. He was a lovely boy and very able. He was what many staff called a sore loser. He would go into a violent grump any time he was a loser at a game or he couldn't find something. Next, we have Harold. I received Harold in my class as a compulsory transfer from another school who had permanently excluded him. Harold came with a thick lever arch folder full of reports, telling of how he had made persistent sexually explicit threats towards members of staff. After reading this, I asked my head teacher what support I would get in class for this child. I was told none. On his first day, he started fighting in my class. I shouted to him to stop, and he walked out of my room. I had to find a learning assistant to watch my class while I ran to try and find him. He was sitting up on a window ledge and refused to talk to me. From that moment on, I knew that shouting at Harold was not going to be the way forward. Harold's parents were both drug addicts, and his dad was in jail for violently assaulting someone in the pub. Harold had been there and witnessed it. Finally, we have Caroline. Caroline was in foster care. She was very quiet, sweet and compliant at all times in the classroom, always trying to just blend in. There were issues in the playground at times, and out of earshot, or when she thought it was out of earshot, she would put on a completely different tone of voice and would be really quite cruel. At home, she was horrendous. She would shout, swear, steal, smear excrement up the walls. She was horrible to her foster mum in particular. So let's go back in time a bit again to look at how my training had prepared me for teaching these children. I remember vaguely a single session during my teacher training where we watched a number of videos of a toddler and their mums in a room. The mum would leave and different responses were seen from each child. We were told that their responses indicated what kind of attachment they had. We were told in the same session that a key book to have and read was Lifespan Development by Helen B. And that was it. That was my training in attachment. During my teaching career, the words attachment issues were never mentioned, nor was it anything as wonderful as nurture groups or anything else that could have made a massive difference to these children's lives. So how do I know a lot more now than I did even just 6 years ago? Well, I left teaching to adopt 2 children with my husband. Before we could do this, we attended some preparation classes which focused a lot on the difficulties children with attachment could have. The biggest training of all, of course, is having lived through the consequences of attachment issues for the past 6 years. I'm not going to lie. At times, it's been absolutely horrific. I've been hit, punched, kicked, screamed at. I've had doors repeatedly slammed. I've had objects thrown at me, and countless items in our house have been broken. I've cried and drunk a lot of wine. However, time, patience, love and research have helped us get through these times and move to instances, quite a lot of instances, of laughter, joy, and lots of moments of pride at our children's achievements against the odds. I've done vast amounts of reading on the subject of attachment, and I now really understand my own children's behaviour and mindset, and also the behaviour of the children I used to teach. I now fully appreciate that all the time their behaviour is communication. They weren't just being bad, they weren't trying to be evil. They weren't just a sore loser at games. For each and every one of the children I mentioned, it all comes down to attachment issues. Let's have a quick look at each of them again. Robin had the loss of her dad and was being neglected by her mum. Her neediness was a cry for help. This was a little girl who just wanted to be loved and wanted the affection that she had missed out on as a baby and was continuing to miss out on at home. Danny was neglected by both parents. Her bravado attitude was a front for the scared little girl that was inside. She ripped her work up, not to be bad, but because the praise was too scary, because there would be further to fall from that place of pride to the place she was made to stay. Scott's lying was because he was covering up the truth and didn't have a true understanding of his past and so just created a story for himself. He was clingy because he lacked the attention and attachment he needed at home. He just wanted someone to own him and love him. The stealing is a sign that he didn't understand ownership. He didn't feel owned by anyone, and so why would possessions be owned? Jack had suffered the loss of his mum and then the loss of his dad. Each time he lost at a game, it was a trigger to his past, and that feeling of loss was happening to him all over again. Harold lacked attachment with his parents and was neglected. The sexualised language, which I actually never witnessed when I taught him, was likely what he had heard at home. He just wanted someone to look after him and care for him. Caroline would be quiet and pleasant because she felt that if she pleased people, then they wouldn't hurt her. She was too scared to let go at school. Home was her safe place where she could let it all out. But the behaviours she was exhibiting were her trying to be in control, as she was feeling the rest of her life was completely out of control. As I have learned, toileting and food are classic control mechanisms. She was truly horrible to her foster mum, but this was her trying to test and see if she would be pushed away again. Over the past 6 years, I have learned so much about attachment, trauma, and its lasting effects. I live it each and every day with my children. I do wish I could go in a time machine back and help the children above just a little bit more from a place of understanding. So what would I do differently? Each and every one of those children needed nurturing. They needed to be given the opportunity to go back to the developmental milestones that they had missed. I would have spent my time training to run a nurture group for these children. I would have made time to give them more one-to-one support, and I would have put in place simple classroom strategies to help them navigate what must have been a scary place for them. Individual visual timetables, egg timers, transitional objects, and the creation of a safe place within the classroom would have been the norm. I would have worked any learning assistant time in such a way to give some support to these pupils, even if they didn't have designated hours. I would have worked into the timetable opportunities for them to participate in activities that would allow them to revisit gaps in their learning and development. I would have focused any of my CPD time on play therapy, learning nurturing approaches, and I would 100% have scrapped punitive approaches such as reward charts. Any support for learning time I would have asked to have been within the classroom so that the child did not feel excluded. I would not have used the school policy of giving detentions, but instead would have given time in. With this approach, the child still has time away from the activity they were doing, but instead of being excluded, they would spend quiet time beside me. Finally, I would have insisted on having structured playground activities for those who struggled with that free playtime. Obviously, I can't wave a magic wand and go back in time. Thankfully, I have the chance to help more children in the future. I am now working as an educational volunteer for Adoption UK Scotland, where we aim to help bring training, support and strategies to teachers and schools across Scotland. A child doesn't have to be adopted or fostered to be living through trauma and have attachment issues. They could be experiencing it at home each and every day. The support and strategies could help a huge number of children from all walks of life. Adoption UK Scotland did a pilot scheme last year in North Berwick called the Attachment Ambassador Programme. It was a huge success and is now available to be rolled out across as many schools as possible. If you would like to know more about this, then do send an email to Adoption UK Scotland using the email address above. Or if you would like to read more about how life rolls as an adopter, then please do have a read of my blog. But where should all this learning be taking place? Personally, I think it should be a compulsory block within teacher training courses. It's an absolute fact that children can't learn until they are emotionally able to do so. Their early life experience may mean lots of gaps in their development, and so it's up to us, well, you, as teachers, to teach at the level appropriate for that child. There are really simple strategies that can help make life better for such children at school, but their reasoning really has to be understood before they can be implemented. There are many teachers who are willing to take on board strategies, but if they don't have the background understanding of why, then they may not implement them effectively. Here is an example. My youngest child has 2 teachers, a job share situation. This is a fact of life nowadays, but for children with attachment issues, this can be problematic. He has 1 teacher, Monday, Tuesday, and another one, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I had asked for a transitional object to be used with my son between the 2 teachers. The reason for this is when one teacher leaves, the child may feel that they are then left out of mind, they're forgotten about. I had wanted the teacher who left on a Tuesday to give an object to my child when she was leaving to then give to the Wednesday teacher, and the same process to be repeated on the Friday to the Monday. This was something that the school had agreed to do, and the reason for only doing it on the days when one teacher leaves and another one comes in is to help prepare the child for that change. It is a visual clue for them. Instead, however, what was happening was the object was being sent home each and every night with my child. This meant that the impact of this strategy was lost. There is a big emphasis on raising attainment and money being given to schools to do just that. Children with attachment issues are undoubtedly, and it's well documented, some of the lowest academic achievers. Until proper training is given to schools on attachment, then absolutely no improvement will take place for those children. What do we need? We need training for staff. We need strategies to use in the classroom. We need nurture groups. We need one-to-one staffing for these children, and above all, we need understanding.